You're listening to the Fierce Value Podcast, episode 181. Fat Liberation Gone Too Far? Misconceptions and Mistakes. I'm your host, Vinny Wellsby. Let's do it.
Perfect.
Hello, welcome to this episode. So nice to see ya. How's life? What's the crack? What's going on? Are you okay? I'm okay. Hey, thank you for last episode as behaving as my therapists. Guess what? I feel so much better about this whole situation. Like there's this shame that was just there, just lingering like a bad smell, and a lot of it has been lifted just by sharing the story with you. So that's just what a life lesson. I know that probably most of you don't have a podcast that you can share your problems with, but perhaps if you are burdened by shame about something, perhaps if it feels good for you or safe for you, sharing that with someone could be helpful. Shame cannot survive the light, remember? And yeah, also if you're like worried about me or my mental health, I'm good, I'm fine, I'm good. I'm, in a totally different situation. I live back in Vancouver now, which is my happy place, and have access to my friends. We're not in lockdown, in quarantine. I have my therapist that I talk to every 3 weeks. Like, I have Doogie the dog. So don't you worry about me, okay? Everything's good in my life. And obviously I was sharing some shit times, but, we all go through shit times. So, yeah. Okay, well, this episode I have been saving up because I've been collecting things that I see on the internet when people are criticizing fat liberation, the things that they are saying. And I've been collecting them to make an episode. And so some of these episodes, it really takes some research and time to get, because you have an idea and you're like, okay, well, I need to collect, I need to do the research or find the evidence or let's see what's going on in the world. And so yeah, I've done an episode kind of similar to this. I googled fat liberation and I went onto YouTube. Oh, YouTube is the worst for fat hate. Honestly, YouTube is like, if you look at fat liberation or fat positive on YouTube, like 97% of the stuff that you see is all just absolute dog shit, horrible, awful. I did an episode of what some of these people were saying in their videos, and it was just nonsensical. It was one of the videos was this guy saying, oh, people who subscribe to fat liberation want to sleep with their clothes off in bed and want to do that with children and want to do that with children they don't know. And it's like, what the fuck? What? Oh Lord, because they'd seen one article about someone saying something somewhere, and they're just like, oh well, fat liberationists are sexual deviants and perverts. I mean, we are probably, but not in that way. Yeah, so this is more kind of understanding what people believe about fat people, fatness, and therefore why they might have certain beliefs that are a little bit more kind of on the cusp. So these are the beliefs where, someone might be well-meaning and, say if you say to your friend or whatever, your mum or whatever, oh, I'm getting into fat liberation or anti-diet or whatever. And they say, well, doesn't that mean that you're encouraging people to glorify O word or something? And so kind of those instead of the aggressively ridiculous out there notions, because it's easy for us to dismiss them, like I've, since fat liberation, first was documented in the 1960s, I've not yet seen anywhere that says if you're a fat liberationist, you mustn't sleep naked and with your children and invite. It's just not happened yet. I mean, yeah, who knows? You can't say that maybe there is a document that I've yet to discover that says that, but I'm going to err on highly unlikely because that is not what fat liberation is. Okay, so let's talk about... By the way, I had COVID, so that's why we're kind of a little less on the podcast, a bit of time on the podcast. But does my voice sound a little bit deeper and sexier? Thanks, COVID. No, it's probably not COVID, but it was okay. It was the first time I had COVID, and obviously I didn't die, so woo, yay for me. Anyway, don't know why I needed to tell you that. I'm just like, by the way, dear, I had COVID. Feel sorry for me, huh? Okay, so let's talk about the core tenets of anti-fat beliefs. Okay, so the cornerstones of when someone is anti-fat, the things that they are likely to believe, and probably stuff that we do have in the past believe, maybe still do believe, maybe there's some kind of like remnants in our brains where you're like, oh yeah, I do think that. So, and we're going to talk about kind of why, and this is me theorizing, right? And obviously as a former hardcore fat hater, I can remember like what I was thinking. Okay, so first one is being fat is unhealthy. Being unhealthy is bad, therefore fat people are bad. So that idea that, being fat is unhealthy is just like, that's the kind of the biggest thing, right? And then underneath that, well, then unhealth is bad, morally bad. And so fat people are bad because they are choosing to be unhealthy. So because of that, our humanity is in question, because by existing, we are bad. Therefore, what we say or the beliefs that we have or the things that we support or what we do in our life, all of that also must be bad. It's a shortcut to discount anything a fat person says because they have the ultimate quote unquote gotcha. And the gotcha is, but you're fat. So it doesn't count. What you're saying, how you're feeling, any joy or goodness doesn't count because you're fat, right? And I know that I felt like that about myself too. Like, it doesn't matter if I'm good at my job or if I'm a nice person or whatever, because I'm fat. And, that kind of erases everything, right? Fat haters really kind of, well, you're fat, so it doesn't matter about who you are, what you say. You have this fatal character flaw. And it's a character flaw, right? It's not a body type, it's a character flaw, according to many people. Okay, next is fat people choose to be unhealthy. So because of the portrayal of fatness in our society, we learn things about fat people. And one of those things is the idea that fat people have their fingers in their ears saying, la, 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 while a straw is in their mouth. I don't know how they're saying la 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 while a straw is in the mouth too, but imagine straw is in the mouth, sucking up a liquidated cheeseburger. It's almost like that. Do you know that meme? It's a cartoon, and it's a guy, like it looks like a superhero or a captain or something, and he's wiping his sweaty brow as he tries to decide which button to press. Like, you can imagine that one button is, launch the missiles and the other one is don't. And so that meme, and it's almost like, this is how I feel that fat haters picture us, that there are two buttons in front of us and we're the fat and sweaty person and we're not sure which one to pick. And the two buttons, one says good health and the other says bad health plus a Twinkie. And we breathlessly slam the Twinkie one because we're so uninterested in health and so desperate for a Twinkie that we would forego choosing good health in order to embrace bad health and get a Twinkie. Like that's how I imagine fat haters thinking about fat people. And so, if you imagine that scenario, what you would think about that person is just like disgust, confusion as why they can't make the right decision. Like you'd probably want to, if you saw this play out and you're watching it on the telly, you'd probably want to shout at the telly being like, don't hit the other one, hit that button. And then the person doesn't and you're like, oh, for fuck's sake. And so that's how I feel that those who hate fat people or fatness are viewing fat people just like, oh, for fuck's sake. Why did they do that? Why did they choose that? Why can't they control themselves? But the thing is, people have and should have body autonomy, right? And when the rest of society, other people, not fat people, when the rest of society who are not fat exercises body autonomy, often people don't have shit to say. And obviously there's lots of examples where they do have shit to say. But most of the time, if people are exercising body autonomy and it means that they could have worse health outcomes, most of the time, if it aligns with what we say is good and bad in society, people don't say shit because they don't care about health, right? So say if someone drives a car, people are not saying, oh, they're choosing to be unhealthy because they could have a car accident and they could be hurt and die. You're so unhealthy for driving a car. Or if someone engages in sports, people are not like, oh, you're choosing to be unhealthy. Say if someone is going for a nice swim in the lake, they could drown. Oh, you're choosing to engage in bad health. We only care about people's body autonomy when we don't think they should be allowed to make decisions for themselves. And why shouldn't fat people have body autonomy? Because apparently we always make the wrong decision and we have no self-control. We are unintelligent and incapable. And if that's what someone believes about fat folks, then it's easy to believe that we choose to be unhealthy, right? It's like a kind of like puzzle pieces fit together. If fat people are ignorant and in denial, then it makes sense that we choose to be unhealthy. Fat people become fat and stay fat because they eat too much food and don't exercise or don't exercise enough. So something that is really comforting for me and for a lot of people is certainty, right? Is engaging in black and white thinking, is knowing that if I do A, B, C, I'll be a good person. If I follow these rules, then I will achieve this result. If there's this input, then there will be this output. But the world is a lot more complicated than that. And that desire and that continuing to buy into black and white thinking is a manifestation of white supremacy culture. If you want to learn more about white supremacy culture and how it manifests, just Google white supremacy culture and you'll see the list of different things that we all engage in, which is not helpful, because the reality is that hardly anything in life is actually black and white. And it is true as well for human bodies. Even basic machines are more complicated than put this in and this thing will come out. There's so many different variables at play. And something as complicated as the human body, it's just not the reality for most people. And even if every single fat person was fat because they ate too much, quote, too much food and never exercised, that would still be our right, as we should have body autonomy. But the thing is, that concept is a trope. It's a stereotype. We know that fatness is just a normal way to have a body, and we have almost 100 years of data showing that eating less and exercising more doesn't make people thin in any reliable way. And we think about like most fat people in society. Do we think that most fat people in society would choose to stay fat if they could just eat less and exercise more and then permanently become a thin person? Or temporarily become a thin person? Most people, as we know, engage in eating less and exercising more to try and attempt to become a thin person, because living in society as a fat person can be very, very difficult. For me, if I had the choice, if someone said, hey, you can, become a thin person or stay a fat person, I'd stay a fat person. And there are many fat people who do choose to become fat or to become fatter. They're probably the outliers. Well, not probably, they are. If you think about, I would love to have the data of like how many fat people have attempted to become thin, not just how many people, because we all know that most, especially women, have attempted diets. But what percentage of fat people have attempted diets? I'm sure that info is somewhere. If you know, let me know. But because I think that the number is really high. So if it was a simple case of eat less, exercise more, then most people in the world would be thin. Because I don't know, I don't know if thin people know how egregiously awful we treat fat people in society. As fat people know, right? Then depending on what size you are and depending on if you have other marginalized identities, then right? Okay, so another belief that they have is that on rare occasions, very rare occasions, some fat people deserve pity because they have an eating disorder or other health condition that made them fat, but they are still disgusting and should still lose weight, right? So I don't know if you've ever seen this or engaged in this yourself, is that idea of being a good fatty or a bad fatty. And when you're deep in hating yourself, you will try to display more good fatty characteristics or behaviors. And sometimes you would do it to keep yourself safe, because being a bad fatty in our society is not safe for many people. And so what that might look like is saying, oh, I'm fat, but I'm trying to lose weight. Oh, I'm fat, but I only eat salads. Or, oh, I'm fat, but I'm an marathon runner. And none of those things are bad per se, but it's the idea of a fat person being more palatable if they engage in good fatty behaviors. And so another trope is no fault fatty, of the good fatty, So if you're a no fault fatty, then you're, quote, better than a fat person who has no, quote, excuse for being fat. And this is definitely something that I have believed in the past. I remember sitting in the car with my then boyfriend and saying to him, you know what? I've worked it out. All fat people have eating disorders. I remember telling him, all fat people have eating disorders. And he was like, I don't know about that. And I was like, no, think about it. The reason that I'm fat is because, and then I was saying that I eat too much food. I was not eating too much food. I was restricting. All of my life, I was restricting food. Anyway, but I really had a skewed perspective of how much food I should eat. Also, it wouldn't make sense in my mind that I would see fat people in my life eating what I would deem as a normal amount of food. And because in my mind, fat people obviously eat so much food that, okay, well, they must be eating food in private. Therefore, they must have an eating disorder. Literally, I was just like, I know it. I know all of these fat people are fat because they are secretly eating lots of food. Which is totally just, no, wrong. Because could it possibly be at the time that fat people just eat food the same way that straight-sized people eat food? Yes. Yes. But I couldn't reconcile that in my brain. Like, it just didn't make sense. It couldn't possibly be that fat people were just like the rest of us, and me, I was fat at the time too. And even if fatness was an eating disorder, or all fat people do have eating disorders, does someone living with an eating disorder or an illness deserve our love and care? Yeah. Yeah. But are there times that we should be withholding love and care? And in what are those circumstances? Who gets to decide? Who gets to decide that, if you have something that quote causes you to be fat, or that, this is all like, we don't really know a lot of times what comes first and what causes what, and so I'm saying causes in quotation marks. Even if you have something that causes fatness, does that mean that you're okay? But then what if someone else says, I don't believe it does cause fatness? Well, then are you not okay? Like, is it, like, who gets to decide, right? Are we going to have a questionnaire when someone comes into the hospital where we ask them every choice that they have ever made in life, and the choices that we personally don't like, according to our politics, mean that they go to the bad patient ward and are denied or delayed treatment? Because that's totalitarianism or fascism or authoritarianism. And I'm saying that, like, go to the bad patient ward. We're kind of doing that a lot of the times, because when we're looking at people, we're making a judgment, right? We all do it, right? We make judgments about who they are. And when people are accessing care, healthcare providers are humans, and they also will be making judgments. And that's why things like when Black folks have babies, their mortality rate is sky high compared to white people who deliver babies. That's why when we had bird flu, H1N1, and fat people were dying at a higher rate, and people were saying, well, it's because they're fat. And then afterwards they looked at the actual what was going on, and it turned out that fat people were getting treatment provided to them later when they were in hospital. And that delay meant that they had worse outcomes. And so that bias that the healthcare providers had, well, fat people have worse outcomes, so should we be giving them the treatment and therefore delaying treatment, therefore they have bad outcomes, therefore we were right. Fat people have worse outcomes. So all of this is just, who gets to decide if someone is worthy? Do we want to have a society that has this pity meter where someone that deserves pity, it will be doled out to them, and someone who doesn't, and they're rejected from society because we don't like that they have made a choice that means that they are less healthy? Okay, next. Fat people deny any claims that fatness is linked with poor health outcomes. So this is just not accurate, right? So fat liberationists have pointed out that we have a correlation with fatness and certain conditions, and therefore let's explore what the cause could be. So we ask for more inquiry. So, for example, historically, women have been more likely to die in car crashes. Now, is that because women are inherently unhealthy and weak? Or can we investigate a little bit more and find out that it's because crash test dummies were made as the size and weight and dimensions of men, and that seat belts were designed for men's bodies? Right? So currently where we're at with science around fatness is that fat people may have worse outcomes in certain areas. We don't know why. Therefore, we're just going to blame the fatness. So it's like any other, example. Say with this example of the women are more likely to die in a car crash. Imagine if they stopped there and said, it's because they're women. Women just, they're bad drivers. That's why they're dying more in car crashes. Their bodies are not meant to be traveling in boxes at 70 miles per hour. It's like those, you remember when it was, bicycles came about and it was like women shouldn't be going on there because they're going to have orgasms and, have fun and stuff. And women's bodies can't travel at that speed because, their ovaries would fly out through their eyeballs or something. Right. And so we can, have more inquiry and discoveries, and let's see what could be going on. And so where most people are at is that there's a correlation, therefore it means that fatness is the cause. But Fat Liberationist says there's a correlation, and let's continue exploring what the cause could be. Vinny from the future here. I just wanted to add in here, when I say let's continue to explore what the cause could be, I'm referring to the idea that it's actually fat shaming. It's actually fat people not getting evidence-based care. It's the fact that fat folks are more likely to have dieted, which causes poorer health outcomes. Not let's continue to belabor the point that fat people might have different outcomes and it's due to having fat tissue when we don't have that evidence. Kind of like, do you know the whole story about vaccines and autism and how it's one dodgy British doctor who made up a study? Watch a documentary. If you haven't seen it before, go watch a documentary on it. There's loads of things on YouTube. And so because of that, there was the whole big movement of anti-vax movement. And so then because of that, there had to be many, 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 many studies to debunk this guy's claims. He lost his license, by the way, so that's satisfying. He ended up marrying Elle Macpherson. Do you remember her? I think that's who he married. He married a model anyway. He lives in America now. Anyway, sidetrack. So, so much time was wasted and so many people died because they were exploring, like, do vaccines cause autism? When autism, would you rather have a dead child or a child with autism? I mean, to most of us, it's a pretty simple question, right? And that positioning of autism as this absolutely horrific thing, this just, thing that God, please, I'd rather just have a child that's not vaccinated. And it's the same with this, like fatness, that it's this awful thing. And so we must keep studying fatness to understand how we can eradicate it versus studying the bias around it and the mistruths around it and that type of stuff. So when I was re-listening to this section, I was like, oh, it kind of sounds like I'm saying we need to keep studying like how terrible fatness is. But we've literally got a bajillion studies about that. And so it's probably time to move on. And as well, because there's no, I've said many times, there's correlation with fat bodies and poorer health outcomes. But there's also so much that shows us that there are so many protective benefits of fatness and fat people having better outcomes and fat people living longer. I feel like I might have belabored the point that, yeah, we know that fat people can be sick, for the fat haters, so that they know that I know that fat people can be sick. I think I belabored it a little bit too much in this episode. So fat people can be sick and they can be healthy and they can be anywhere in between. And also all of that doesn't mean that the fat person is morally better or worse because of their health status. So anyway, editing Vinny out. Fat people get sick and die, just like thin people. Fat people are at higher risk for certain conditions, but we also know that fat people are protected from other conditions, and studies show that fat people can live longer than, quote, normal weight people. It's almost like human bodies are more complex and have different outcomes, and we can't just rely on BMI. Weird that, right? Weird. So do we not want to be more curious to help understand how to better support health in all populations? Do we only want to offer health to people who are already healthy? Okay, so next one is fat people need to become thin people in order to be healthy and gain any amount of respect. So no one needs to change their bodies in order to gain respect. We can pursue health at our current size, and there's no reliable way to make fat bodies into thin bodies. You know, it's a classic. Oh, there's a bully on the playground who says that, you know, so-and-so is ugly because they have ginger hair. Would you say to that child, well, bitch, you better fucking dye your hair, go and dye your hair to blonde or something, or brown or whatever, so that the bully can chill the fuck out? No, you educate the person to say, you educate the bully and be like, hey, stop being a fucking dick. So why should fat people have to become thin people in order to have people stop treating us like shit? We shouldn't. Okay, shaming fat people will help them become thin or make them rightly embarrassed and contrite, which is good. Fat people must be ashamed of their fatness, right? So people who don't like fatness or fat folks, they're like, well, fine. If you must stay fat, you better be sorry about it. You better be embarrassed. You better be apologetic. So it's kind of the thought of, if we can't control your body, we will try and control your mind and how you view yourself. And the way that we internalize that is, if we can't be small in our bodies, we must keep our spirit small. We must be apologetic that we cannot or will not attempt to become a good thin person. If we, quote, choose this body, then we must apologize to society by having good behavior and a good attitude. Because accepting our bodies as they are may encourage other fat people to rise up and not let shame take a hold of them. And we can't have that. That is a scary concept. Like, people who are historically marginalized, not letting shame take a hold of them is scary, because we like our fat people subservient and penitent. If fat people claim power, that means in the mind of a fat hater, they will want to take the fat hater's power. And they will feel like, I don't want to cede my power, as I know how badly society treats those with less power. And again, that's white supremacy thinking of power as a finite thing. Not marginalizing someone else doesn't mean then that they have to marginalize you in order for them to be equal to you. It just doesn't work like that, right? But if you have power, the idea that someone could rise up and say, I'm not listening to your bullshit, I'm going to take power for myself, would be scary, right? And you'd be like, I don't want that to happen, so I'm going to do everything I can to continue with the narrative that those people are bad. All right, next is, hating fatness is not about discrimination, but about concern for public health. So imagine I'm a fat hater. I might say, if I deny that I have bias, it means that I'm a good person. If I care about health, I am a good person. Admitting I may have bias shakes me to the core of my being and is not something I could admit to, because I believe bias means that I'm less worthy. I struggle with believing my worth, so let's not consider that I have bias, because I'm doing good in the world by hating fatness and encouraging health. And my view of health as a body size is backed by almost everyone I know. It's good to be cruel, to be kind. And I'm thinking about the people who are liberal and who are fat haters, who really identify as being a good person. And the thing is, having bias doesn't make us a bad person. It just makes us it just means that we've grown up in a society and we have a human brain, and our brain has developed shortcuts to help us make quick decisions and survive in society. And some of those things are helpful and some of those things are not so helpful, right? It doesn't mean anything about you if you have bias and decide, just fucking love being biased and I'm not going to change that, then, maybe that's not so great. But the thing is, most of our bias is absolutely unconscious. And if we are working to be better members of society, and there's a huge area where we have really egregious bias, that could be very unsettling for people to realize that. You'd probably just be like, no, it's not bias, it's about health. And caring about health is a good thing, right? Is what people might believe. Okay, finally, fat people are delusional, complainers, and a joke. Because I deny the humanity of fat people. Anything they say is not evidence-based or to be listened to. Their cries for equality are a joke when there are, quote, better or more worthy causes. And anyway, all this could be easily solved if they become smaller. Fat discrimination isn't real. People just don't like fat people because they are lazy, greedy. That's not bias or discrimination. That's just the truth. So that's for someone that would be someone who is a little bit more kind of on the right wing of political beliefs, of denying the humanity of fat people and just laughing at fat struggles, or not believing them. This, there's a name of an argument. I can't remember what it is, which is you shouldn't focus on this thing that interests you because there's better things to focus on. Like you shouldn't focus on fat liberation because there are hungry children in Africa. That was all. How many times were we told that as children? And did that help us? Was that helpful? No. And so shaming people for the thing that interests them and gets them excited and is something that they're passionate about is not helpful, right? So something that I've been thinking about, I've been doing this course called Calling In, talking about cancel culture and how to be better at calling in or calling out or whatever, by Loretta J. Ross. It's really good. And something that she teaches is, she says, what we teach about in this class you can share, but the stories that people share about their personal stuff don't share. So one of these concepts I want to share is spheres of influence. And so my ability to influence people who are listening to the show is probably quite high because you're probably interested in fat liberation. You're probably already on the journey. You might like me. And so we share a lot of the same beliefs and political ideologies and stuff. And so my sphere of influence with maybe you, or maybe my friends, or maybe my family or other people that love me would be great. And so it's that idea of preaching to the choir. So if I want to make an impact in the world, it's great that, we talk to the people around us. But if we think about, expanding out into a circle, what about those people who are kind of, maybe they share 80% of the same beliefs that we do, or 50%. And how much influence then can we have over them? So say, maybe a family member would be in the 50%, right? Because maybe they say, well, I love you, but I don't agree about the whole fat thing. That sphere of influence that you still have influence. And so you can still maybe influence them into being kinder to fat people, or maybe not. But the thing is, when someone is like 95% out of, they've only got 5%, we only share 5% of similar beliefs. Trying to get them to admit that fat people are okay or should be alive or should exist, like basic things, they're just like, nah, I don't think so. We might be wasting our time at trying to get those people to come along on the journey with us. So the stuff in here is thinking about, trying to understand the people that maybe only share a tiny amount of our beliefs, up to people who we're sharing a lot of the same beliefs, but maybe they're on the fence, right? And so these are the people who could go either way and be like, fat liberation is bullshit because they heard a video about something and they're like, well, I heard X, Y, Z. So let's quickly go over those things so that you can, if you want to, don't have to. If you're having a conversation with someone and they say, oh, XYZ, you can say, not so much. Okay, so first thing, fat liberation. We demonize people seeking health. Wrong. In fact, we want access to health for more people, fat people, right? And so if people are seeking health, good for you. Love it. If you're not seeking health, good for you. Whatever works for you, right? So this is just incorrect. Okay. Any thought of weight loss or any focus on weight loss is disordered. By the way, these are direct accusations from people on the internet. I'm not going to tell you who, but they're critiques of fat liberation. Okay, so any thought of weight loss or any focus on weight loss is disordered. If you listen to the show for a while, you'll realize, well, even in this episode, I mentioned that most people have or do or are currently attempting to become thinner. In fact, I think it's weird if people don't have that experience. They're like these weird unicorns. Not weird as in it's bad, but it's just so different. And it's so normal to think, I want to be thinner. And guess what? Doesn't mean you're a bad person. Just means that you have a brain. And your brain is trying to do the best in the world and help you feel safe and help you be safe. And so if someone told me that they were attempting to lose weight or they would like to be smaller, yeah, that sounds pretty normal. That sounds like a lot of people. And that doesn't sound to me that I wouldn't say, my brain wouldn't go to, oh, you have a disorder. Oh, there's something wrong with you. To me, it just makes sense, you know. It's like saying, I'm walking out in the rain and snow and I reach and put on a waterproof jacket. Yeah, obviously. Does that mean that you're bad because you don't want to feel the rain and the snow? No, it means that you're a human being. Okay, fat people can never be unhealthy. No, wrong. We don't think that fat people are these superhuman, can never be unhealthy, can never get sick, can never die. We just want people to treat fat people less like pieces of shit. I don't know, it's just so outrageous. Pursuing weight loss makes you a bad person. No. Nope. That we engage in black and white thinking. Listen, every movement is made up of people, right? And people are, this is going to be weird, we're all different, right? And so there are absolutely people in the fat liberation movement that would engage in black and white thinking because we're people, and everyone's on a different place in their journey and doing different things to, and we all have different mental health and we all have different life stories. And so there are absolutely people in the fat liberation community that engage in black and white thinking. If that doesn't feel good for you, for me, it doesn't feel good. I don't like that kind of, this good, this bad type of thing. That's not something that I would engage in. In every movement, there's going to be people who have more maybe stern beliefs or the way their style of communication is maybe a little bit more passionate, or a way that we wouldn't necessarily communicate, or a way that doesn't feel good for us. And that's okay. Just because someone is in a certain movement, if you don't like them, you don't like their style of communicating, that's fine. You don't need to follow them or whatever. But the thing is, there's people in all different types of movement, and there's dickheads in all types of movement, and there's good people in all types of movements. Well, not all types of movement is there good people. I don't know. There I am getting in black and white thinking. I'm thinking the most extreme different types of movements. Anyway, there's going to be dickheads everywhere is what I'm trying to say. So next, we all believe the same things, and if you don't think the same, then you're a bad person. So because I don't want to engage in black and white thinking, For me, this isn't true. There, of course, are more people are some people in the fat liberation community that are more authoritarian and they're more kind of like, you have to do this. I don't engage with that because it doesn't feel good for me. Something that Loretta J. Ross said, which is that course that I'm taking, is when people think the same and move in the same direction, that's a cult. When people think many different ideas and move in one direction, that's a movement. So if we're saying, if you want to belong to fat liberation, you have to do A, B, C. And if you don't, then you are going to be, you're going to be dead to me. If you don't speak this way, and if you don't support these people, if you don't donate to this charity, if you don't do this, that's not the way that we're going to get people to be excited to come along in any movement with us. My way of doing things is hoping that kindness and joy and love will bring people along. And I didn't come up with that, right? Like, some people have been doing that for forever. And unlearning the idea that we have to bully and shame people to come along on this journey. So, as with every movement, there's going to be people who say, if you don't believe the same as me, then you're dead to me. Do you want to fuck with those people? I don't know. Maybe that feels good to you. Maybe not. Whatever. But for me, I don't find it helpful. So, for example, I put a post on Facebook, and it was an old post. And in that post, I used the word fat phobia. I generally don't tend to use fat phobia anymore. I tend to use anti-fat bias. But someone put into the comments, you're not allowed to use fat phobia anymore because your fat friend has a podcast and is a famous fat liberationist. Your fat friend said you're not allowed to use fat phobia anymore. And it was a thin person. I was just like, oh, really? And some fat liberationists say, hey, let's use anti-fatness because fat phobia is ableist, because phobia assumes that there is a mental health condition there, and anti-fat people just hate fat people. But in my mind, yes, absolutely. And also, a lot of people use the word fat phobia. And so these are people who are on our side, right? These are people who are on our side. So do we want to crucify someone because they use a word which is, that was maybe tweaked in, recently, and be like, well, actually, or do we want to, it's like preaching to the choir, or do we want to spend more of our effort on those people who have, who are, in our spheres of influence, maybe a little bit less, maybe they're using the O word, and you can say, hey, maybe that's a little bit more harmful. Yeah. So anyway, and so imagine if it was like that person said, oh, you should use fat phobia, and then they're like, you're a terrible person. They didn't say this, but kind of, you're a terrible person, and because you don't use that word, if you don't use anti-fat bias, then you don't know anything, and if you've not contributed anything to the movement, and you need to be cancelled and whatever. That's how some people will perceive a comment like that. They'll perceive it as you're not welcome. But again, everyone in fat liberation, we're all different. Okay, next. If you should only eat unhealthy food, quote, unhealthy food, and you shouldn't eat, quote, healthy food, even if you like it. So that we tell people that if they eat a salad, they're a bad fat person because they should only be eating things that we perceive as unhealthy. That's not true at all. We want to force people to fuck us or force people to be fat themselves. That's not true. I don't want to have sex with someone who doesn't like fat people. Are you kidding? And I don't care if other people are fat or not. You do you, right? Whatever. It's cool to have different types of bodies in the world. The goal of fat liberation is to make everyone fat. No, it's just not. Using fat lib as an excuse to be greedy or lazy. No. And, if we think about everything that we talked about before, about what people think about fat folks and how all that is based on stereotypes, The whole idea, greedy or lazy, that we hate. Another one is that we hate straight-sized people. No, I'm sure there are fat people that hate thin people, but, probably like a handful of them, because shit. There's so many different people in the world. We love thin people, right? We have sex with thin people. Thin people are everywhere. Thin people haven't necessarily harmed us. It's society, and maybe thin people have been the ones to perpetuate it. But this is just not accurate that we hate thin people. That exercise is bad. No, if you want to engage in exercise, great. If you don't, it's great. We would love it that we can all engage in exercise if we choose to. Next, toxic positivity. That we have to love every aspect of being fat to be fat positive. Because there's some aspects of being fat that are not super fun. Just like there are things about being thin that are not super fun or great or uncomfortable. So it's okay to be not blissed out on every single aspect of fatness and still enjoy your fat body. See how a lot of this is just like black and white thinking, right? Right? So in case you're like, well, okay, well, you said a lot of like what it is and what it's not. What actually is fat liberation? I have a post on my Instagram that just knocks this out in a few words. Fat liberation is a social justice movement created to increase the acceptance of fat bodies and seeks to ensure fat people have equal rights and access as straight-sized people. So nefarious. Yeah, I made that post because someone sent me an email. They watched a video of me saying that I like being fat, and they emailed me saying, "How dare you say small bodies are not attractive?" Because I was like, "Oh, I love I like saying the phrase waves and honey. I like the waves and honey," and I was like, "What? Huh? I did not say that thin bodies are unattractive." Like, unless I was unconscious and like, I don't know, there's no way that I would say that because I don't believe that. But what they heard was something totally different, that they drew conclusions. If I like my fatness, then therefore I must hate thin people. Therefore I must be, desire thin people to become fat, or desire that the world be rid of thin people. It's just, no. And so a lot of people will say, well, this whole thing has just gone too far. Body positivity or whatever, fat liberation. They won't say that. They'll say body positivity. It's gone too far. We're just letting fat people be fat. And it's the idea of fat liberation should only be for the very smallest fat people. Should be only for white fat people, non-disabled fat people in normative bodies, basically. Fat liberation is for the most marginalized people. And we're going to bring everyone else along too, right? And so what makes people say that is because they see very fat people living in society, and they say those people don't deserve acceptance or kindness because they've taken it, quote, too far. So I want to read a message. This is a good message, not trying to be rude message, but I know this is something that a lot of people have thought and have tried to ask, but they just, maybe don't use the best words. So I thought that this was good because I think a lot of people might be thinking this, and you might have people in your life who might say this to you. So, hi Vinny, I was wondering what your thoughts are on everybody is beautiful, you can be healthy at any size, etc. Which I do agree with, but then I question myself with my thoughts on that when I see people on TV that are so large they can't get out of bed or wipe their own bum, etc. So my question, and this is genuine curiosity, if I should word it differently, please tell me how, is where does body positivity end and just plain poor health begin? At what point are you, quote, too large or past the point of body positivity? I'm on my own self-love journey and have been raised with some gnarly diet culture and fat shaming in my family. I'm just trying to see what this side of the world is all about. Thanks. So, I reply, hello, name. Thanks for your message. So I don't prescribe to body positivity community as it stands at the moment, which centers young, thin, white women and says, love your roles. What I subscribe to is fat liberation. Fat liberation says health should be accessible to everyone, not that everyone can be healthy. Health is not possible for many folks for many reasons. That's what people get wrong about health at every size. So health at every size doesn't mean people can be healthy at every size. It means that health should be accessible to people at any size, at every size. It's not denying that fat people can be unhealthy. It's saying no matter your size, you should be able to access treatment and engage in health promoting behaviors or engage in the world. One thing to note about the depictions of super fat folks on TV is that it's deeply dehumanizing, making their lives seem like a freak show and stripping them of their humanity. If someone is super fat, do they not also deserve access to care? Of course, the answer is yes. So that means there is no one, quote, too large or past the point of body positivity. I meant to say fat liberation. A thing to learn is stripping away health from worth and unlearning the awful things we have been taught about people who are just, quote, too fat. So the question is, who is too fat to be cared for, to be a part of our society, to be loved? And the answer is no one. And the person responded, oh, I absolutely love that answer. That totally clears things up in my head. Thanks so much. Yeah, because I feel like people think that, there's a point where should we, quote, encourage someone to accept their body? At what weight should we switch from helping them accept their body to shaming their body? And what weight is that, right? Again, that black and white thinking. What weight do we go from, you go girl, to you need to get surgery and lose weight? And there's a cutoff for many people. There's a cutoff saying, well, someone who's size 18, 20, like, what they think in their head is, well, they might not be unhealthy. That's what it is, okay, well, maybe they can lose weight if they tried. They're on the cusp of being acceptable to me. But someone who is very fat and someone who is disabled, well, they're just too, quote, too far gone. They're just so committed to being unhealthy. This is how people view it. This is not the truth, right? And when we have those beliefs and then we watch shows like My 600-Pound Life, which are horrendous. Please, if you're watching those shows, I know that stuff is entertaining, but if you do want to unlearn anti-fatness, then stopping watching those shows would probably be helpful for you. But again, you might love that show, but really it's only showing fat people in a very one-dimensional way. That they're sad, they're losers, they're greedy, they're subhuman, they're pathetic, they're disgusting, they're unhealthy, they're about to die. So no wonder we, society, would have a cutoff point of when it's gone too far. Because is it right to extend kindness to people of all sizes? And in many people's view, up to a point, and then after the point, that same value that we have of being kind switches to cruelty. Because we think the cruelty is going to work? I don't know. I don't know. Because clearly cruelty has, quote, worked to make these people thin and make anyone thin. I mean, maybe it's worked for some people temporarily. Well, it has, a lot of people have engaged in dieting, and then obviously diets don't work. But it's kind of interesting, isn't it? And so asking yourself, like, who do we think that should have body autonomy? Hopefully you feel like that fat folks should have body autonomy, right? And who should we extend kindness to? And who should have access to the world? So hopefully the next time you see a headline like fat liberation has gone too far, you can read between the lines and decide that you are deciding to, if you want to, extend grace and empathy to everyone, if that feels okay for you, and not say that there's a cutoff where someone loses their humanity. Because that's what a lot of these posts and content is saying, right? They go in with a ton of freaking stereotypes and just eye-rolling misconceptions, and then make a point about how, like this one article that I was looking at from The Guardian was saying that fat pride is wrong because we're making people fat. And so, like, listen to this episode and you can like, well, that's not true. That's not true. That's not true. And also, even if it was, even if it was that fat people people happen to be fatter, can we really trace it to the fat liberation movement? And also, people having bigger bodies, is that necessarily a bad thing, considering we're living the longest we've ever lived? Yeah. So I'm going to make a post with these things. And so if there's any of this, like if you wanted a roundup, then go check out Instagram. There'll be a post up within the week or something. And next episode, I'm thinking, because it's the holiday season. There's many religious and cultural holidays between November and January. And therefore, many of us will be spending time with other humans. And because of that, I was going to do another episode on how to deal with family or people at the holidays. And then it'll come out beginning of December or whatever, sometime in December. Sound good? Uh-huh. All right, well, then, I'll see you in the next episode. If you enjoyed today's episode and you would like to support more content, then go to Ko-fi. It'll be in the Ko-fi. I want to call it Ko-fi. Ko-fi. And you can, for $5, get the Size Diversity Resource Guide. There's other tiers of membership that if you'd like, you can do a one-off donation, or you can do a monthly donation. If we get to a certain amount of donations, then we'll be able to get more episodes out. Currently, we have enough donations for 1 to 2 episodes a month. I would love to be able to do 4 episodes a month like I was previously doing, but we would need your support to be able to do that. So if you appreciate the work that we're doing here at Fierce Fatty, then consider going to Ko-fi, KOFI.com/Fierce Fatty, or go to the show notes to find that link. And thank you for being here, and I'll see you in the next episode. Stay fierce, fatty. See you in a while, alligator. Goodbye.